All right. Hopefully you had a chance to go through each of those examples and identify each element, the US, UR, the NS, CS, the CR. So let's talk about it. So in the first one, right, we have your romantic partner always uses the same shampoo. Soon the smell of that shampoo makes you feel happy. Right? So what's the neutral stimulus? In this case, it's going to be the smell of the shampoo, because before you have any association of that shampoo, is it just going to make you randomly feel happy? Probably not. So the shampoo is the neutral stimulus. What's the unconditioned stimulus? Well, it's the romantic partner. They make you feel happy, right? And that feeling of happiness is the unconditioned response. You don't have to learn to feel happy around somebody you're romantically involved with. But by repeatedly pairing the smell of the shampoo with the partner, soon smelling the shampoo alone makes you feel happy. When the shampoo makes you feel happy, it is now the conditioned stimulus, and feeling happy in response to the smell of the shampoo is the conditioned response. Right? So notice the shampoo is both the neutral stimulus and the conditioned stimulus. How we differentiate it is the response it creates. It's a neutral stimulus when it creates a neutral response. It's a conditioned stimulus when it creates the conditioned response. And feeling happy is both the unconditioned response and the conditioned response. What matters is what made us feel happy. It's an unconditioned response when it's to our romantic partner, the unconditioned stimulus, and it is a conditioned response when it is in response to the shampoo, the conditioned stimulus. So the door to your house squeaks loudly when you open it. Soon your dog begins wagging its tail when the door squeaks. Well, the neutral stimulus is the squeak of the door before any associations are made. You are then the unconditioned stimulus, eliciting the unconditioned response of the tail wagging. After repeatedly pairing the squeak with you, the dog begins to wag its tail in response to the squeak. It has now become the conditioned stimulus. The squeak has, and the wagging has become the conditioned response. The nurse says this won't hurt a bit just before stabbing you with a needle. The next time you hear this won't hurt a bit, you cringe in fear. All right, so what's our neutral stimulus? This won't hurt a bit, because when you hear it, you don't respond. But then after pairing it with the pain of the needle, right, that's the stimulus, and the cringe is then the response. Now when you hear this won't hurt a bit, you cringe in fear. This won't hurt a bit has become the conditioned stimulus, and the cringe is now the conditioned response. Lastly, you have a meal at a fast food restaurant that causes food poisoning. The next time you see the sign for that restaurant, you feel nauseated. Well, the sign was the sign was the neutral stimulus when it didn't produce a response. It becomes the conditioned stimulus when it makes you feel nauseous. The food poisoning is the unconditioned stimulus. The nausea is the unconditioned response when it's due to the food poisoning. And the nausea is due to the restaurant sign and has now become the conditioned response. So what we've been talking about is called classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is when we associate a stimulus with an involuntary response. The bell with the food. This won't hurt a bit with the pain of the needle. The smell of the shampoo with a romantic partner. All right. And this does account for a lot of learning and conditioning that we see. Oftentimes, though, learning involves changes in behavior that are a choice. And when the organism changes its behavior in response to consequences, we're no longer doing classical conditioning, but operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is changing a voluntary behavior in response to consequence. B.F. Skinner is most well known for studying this. He realized that depending on the consequences of a behavior, an animal will increase or decrease the likelihood of that behavior moving forward. He most famously worked with pigeons, trained them to play video games, to dance, to respond to specific stimuli, to do a wide range of things, including guide missiles, interesting enough. Right? So how do we determine what kinds of things alter behavior? Well, this is where we get into this idea of reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of a behavior. A punishment is going to decrease it. But how do we determine when something is a reinforcement and when something is a punishment? Say I come up to you and I say, look, if you don't stop doing whatever it is you're doing right now, I can't see you, whatever you're doing, I'm going to plug this space heater in right next to you. Is that a threat of punishment or an offer of reinforcement? You probably realize that it might depend, right? If it is super hot and you're sweating, the thought of turning on that heater becomes a punishment. Where on the other hand, if it's freezing out, the thought of turning on that heater becomes a reinforcement. Right? So notice that we cannot tell whether or not something is a reinforcement or punishment merely on what that thing is. Instead, we have to identify how it affects the behavior of the organism. A reinforcement is defined as something that increases the likelihood of a behavior. A punishment is a consequence that decreases the likelihood of the behavior. Right? And we cannot decide ahead of time what is a reinforcement and what is a punishment. Some reinforcements seem almost built in, while others exhibit a form of learning. For example, if you were to offer a baby the choice between a cookie and a $20 bill, what would they pick? Most of you are probably pretty confident that the baby would pick the cookie, and I think you're right. We all know that this is because babies are stupid. No, babies aren't stupid. But why isn't the baby seeking the $20 bill? If I offered you the same choice, you'd probably pick the 20. Because even if you wanted the cookies, you'd realize, man, that 20 could buy you a lot of cookies. But why? Why do we respond so readily to money? Money is gross. That's why the baby doesn't want it. It's a piece of paper that's been shoved into hundreds of people's pocket. It's covered in bodily fluids. It's just gross, right? If you saw a piece of like random scrap paper on the ground in a pile of dog poop, are you going to dig it out and take it with you? No. But if you see $100 bill, yeah, a lot of people are going to go ahead and grab that, right? Why do we respond so strongly to money when it in of itself is often a disgusting, gross thing? Well, it's because of what money can get us. Now, this is where we have to differentiate between what we call primary reinforcers and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are things that we are born seeking. These are things we want for themselves, not for what they can get us, but for what they are. These are things that we instinctually are born wanting. These are unconditioned stimuli, things like fun, food, power, attention, sex, are all elements of things that we want because we are a living organism. On the other hand, secondary reinforcers are things that become so associated with primary reinforcers that we will now respond to them as if they are. And that's what happens with money, right? Because we learn over the course of our life pretty quickly, what can money get us? Money can get us all those primary reinforcers. Money can create fun. Money can get us food. Money can get us power. Money can get us attention. Money can get us romance and sex. It plays a role in it, right? Money is a powerful stimulus because it gives us access to primary reinforcers. But notice why we want the money. We want the money for what the money can get us, not for itself, right? Whereas we want fun, not for what fun gets us, because we want fun, right? So secondary reinforcers are anything that becomes so tightly entwined with primary reinforcers, we will respond to them as if they were primary. As students, you might think of grades as a secondary reinforcer, right? If you threaten a 2-year-old, if you don't stop having that tantrum right now, I'm going to give you an F, they're not going to probably care. On the other hand, you take a college student and you tell them, if you do that one more time, I'm going to give you an F, they're going to stop right away, right? It becomes an instant response. A's elicit joy, F's elicit a sense of dread, right? These become reinforcers and punishments because of their associations. You had to learn over time that good grades led to praise, attention, money, opportunity, and bad grades led to loss of privileges, being yelled at. Who knows what occurred when you got those bad grades, right? But you learn the consequences of those individual grades, and now you will perform behaviors just for those grades.